And here we go again. Hello, hello. There we go. Oh my god, I pinned the comment successfully this time, y'all. I managed to do it. Hello, everyone that starts to come in. Hello. We are going to be talking O.H. Ingram whiskey today. I'm very excited. We're going to be talking with CEO Hank Ingram, which I was, yesterday years old when I realized that they were based in Kentucky. So I'm very excited to learn more about the differences and similarities of the whiskey they produce to the whiskeys that are more quintessential and along that Kentucky bourbon trail, more of that vibe. So I'm very excited to learn about that. Very excited to talk about this river aging concept and how it came to be and all the things and what made him even want to try that in the first place. Yes. So we are just waiting for Hank to join us. Here we go. I have no idea if we'll ever be able to ship to Texas, whether or not we can do so. Let me see. There we go.
All right.
Hello, Hank. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm
This
good. Let me see.
after-
Can you all see the Ingram at the top? Yes, y'all can. I try to display all the things.
I've got my vinyl collection. Unfortunately, I don't have a bottle.
That works too. Similar to that of Jefferson's. That's actually a great question already, Miss Sinister, Miss Siam. Okay, well, before we get to that question, because that is very much in line with my line of questioning anyway. Hi, Hank. How are you?
Great. Good to see you.
Good to meet you finally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm very excited to get into all things O.H. Ingram. So let's just start with some background stuff. Um, let's talk about your background. I've read a little bit already, but obviously people who have been watching may not, be as aware. So let's talk a little bit about kind of your background and then how the distillery even came to be. Because I know that initially, in terms of your family history, it didn't start in the whiskey space. So.
No, the closest we ever came to the whiskey space was drinking it. Uh, so, uh, well, and so my family's been in the barge business since the 40s. Since the 40s, we've moved a lot of grain, particularly corn, down the river. So I've grown up around the river, been very familiar with uh, Kentucky and the Inland River system. Um, I kind of joked we moved a lot of raw corn, but we never moved the distilled variety, and now this is really our first foray into handling it. So my background, I'm born and raised in Nashville. Our family's been here since the 50s or so, but our business runs all up and down the inland waterways. So when I was in business school, I needed a project, and so what does one do in business school but join the drinking club? So I joined a bourbon tasting group. We went to a bourbon tasting, and one of the things that struck me was the history of bourbon. So for those that may not know, bourbon actually began its life on the river. So if you go back 200 plus years in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, you don't have roads, you don't have railroads. The river was the major transportation system. And so anybody that wanted to get their barrels out of Kentucky and to greater markets, they put it on flatboats and they sailed it downstream. Well, I said, well, if we used to do it that way 200 years ago, why aren't we still doing it? Did we lose something in the move to land aging? And so from there, I basically created this idea to put it inside a barge. Now, I didn't realize it's actually illegal to warehouse spirits in a vessel. So that comes down to taxes. The tax man wants to know where their
Yeah,
revenue
that's
is.
that. Okay.
So
Yeah,
so that's due to taxes. Of course, it has to do with money. Of course, it does.
of course, it always comes to
It
that.
always comes back to that.
So yeah, our barge is now the only floating barrel house in the world, and it's permitted as such. It goes up and down with the river. It just doesn't go up and down the river, and that's great because it allows us to get motion, obviously from the river as it's rocking, but also heat and humidity of Kentucky and that microclimate. So we're really looking at making a different mousetrap, if you will.
I like that a lot. So basically, well, so from what I read at least, you essentially had to make it clear to them that you weren't planning to travel around travel around the waters with this Rickhouse. It was just going to be stationary at a dock.
That's right.
Before they were finally like, okay, fine.
Well, and now, of course, we're expanding. We're building our second barge, so I'm going through all that permitting all over again. You
Hmm.
know, when you have a farm to pop up another building, when you're on the water, then you got Coast Guard and Corps of
Hmm.
Engineers, um,
Wow.
all these other agencies that everybody talks about the TTB. Well,
I was gonna say, is there any maritime law related stuff that you have to deal with, or not so much because you're docked?
oh no, since it's on an inland river, it's a navigable waterway. There's
And it's what, the Mississippi River?
relations. I'm
It's
sorry.
on the Mississippi River?
That's right. Melody,
Okay.
Mississippi.
Okay. Interesting. And so, but in terms of where the barge is located, it's in Kentucky, but it's just on the Mississippi River, right?
Yeah, that's right. So
I'm
we're at
not
the
great with
and,
all the water, land, and all that.
oh yeah. Well, listen, I forget it's second nature because again, I stare at a map of the rivers all day long. Not a lot of people
Yeah.
do. So, the Ohio and the Mississippi, where they come together, is at the tip of Cairo, Illinois, and right there you have Missouri and you have Kentucky. So we're on the Kentucky bank, right below the confluence. So we're essentially using all this energy that's coming through that point of the river from the two rivers coming together. A lot
Mm.
of water flow. Normally, right now, it's actually at a pretty severe drought. So
Mm.
we're wanting rain because
Yeah.
we may be a land facility here before too
Is
long.
that affecting you guys' angel share then?
We think it does. So we think the moisture off the river kind of provides this osmotic barrier, which when you have hot and dry, you have a lot of angel share.
Hmm.
When you go lower in the traditional rick house, you have more moisture, it's cooler temperatures, and so you don't lose as much. You tend to lose proof because you lose water or you lose alcohol faster than water. On the
Yeah.
top, water faster than alcohol, so you gain proof. Our barge really it mimics, I'd say, the upper levels of a rick house, the fourth, fifth, sixth level. The bottom barrel, we go 7 barrels tall. There's about 3,000 barrels on the barge. Bottom level is about 90 degrees high in the summer. Top level is 125. At night, it'll drop 40, 50 degrees into the 70s and 80s. So big daytime shifts inside the barge with that hot steel. And then again, that moisture is just keeping the barrels from drying out. So it's a little different technique than a hilltop in Kentucky.
Yeah. So with that being the case, how would you, for someone who's never tried yours but drinks a lot of the more common bourbons known up and down the bourbon trail, how does that process affect how it tastes differently from what you would expect from like a Buffalo Trace, Heaven Hill, etc.?
Sure. I describe it with extraction. So we're seeing a
Mm.
lot of barrel extraction. The motion keeps it swirling inside the barrel, so you have more interaction between the whiskey and the barrel. So that's going to pick up a lot of those traditional barrel char notes. Um, I'm hoping again a lot of this is still hypothesis because we've only been doing the barge aging for about 3.5 years now.
Okay.
And by the way, we take new barrels of bourbon and rye, and they stay on the barge their entire life. So it is our rick house essentially.
Yeah.
It's all new make on there. So we had some initial barrels that had a little bit of land terra firma aging, but everything is in the barge. And then the upper levels are, you're going to see that whiskey driving deeper into the barrel as you would with any hot Rickhouse. But it's really the motion. I think the noticeable element is we get a little increased oxidation, a little darker color, and
The color for you guys, some reference for y'all.
yeah,
I'm currently
and
sipping on the
movements
Flagship
on the
bourbon.
back.
Hmm.
And that all I think translates to that nice, soft, smooth finish on the back end. We
It is
do.
definitely a smooth finish.
Yes, people say where's the burn, where's the hug, and I said, well, I don't know. I think the river
There's
just
no burn.
the edges.
Yeah, there's literally no burn. It's delicious. We had a question from one of our lovely regulars. Okay, so Miss Sinister said she'd really love to see if your process is similar to that of Jefferson's with their Oceans line.
Hmm. I
Is there
certainly.
anything in it? Do they? I don't even know what their process is with that because I don't really drink Jefferson's that much. Are you familiar with their process with their Oceans line?
Certainly. I mean, I get asked this a lot because,
Okay.
water and water.
Yeah, exactly.
The difference really is I'd say finishing versus aging. So it's my understanding that Jefferson's takes a product that's been on land, and then they kind of finish off the aging at the ocean for a few months.
Okay.
Ours is its entire life. It's in the floating Rickhouse, and the nice thing about that, when you have 3,000 barrels to choose from, you have a spice rack. So different barrels are going to develop different flavor profiles over time. We have the ability to go in and choose this barrel and that barrel and that barrel and blend them together to get that desired result. We're not saying, okay, here's the batch that we put on the barge and now we have to blend it all together because we got to make room for the next batch. It's very much that spice rack developing approach.
I like that. And so, what's the oldest in your blend in terms of amount of time it's been in the barrel?
For our rye and our rye is at least 3 years. Our blue label bourbon is at least 4 years.
Okay.
And so we're getting through the last bit of our bourbon that had, maybe 6 to 12 months on land. And as we've cleared through things that have been on the barge longer and longer, we obviously see, in my opinion, a lot of these flavors that we want to be developing. We're seeing more expression of that in those barrels. So really excited about what the river's doing there. And then on our flagship, the flagship is this really cool happy accident. So our straight whiskey, which was our very first expression.
And that's the white label, right?
That's correct, the white label. So white for whiskey, blue and black for bourbon, and red for rye.
Oh. Huh, I like that. Okay. I like that y'all
People,
didn't go typical and go like green for rye or like red and orange for bourbon like people usually do. So that's cool.
yeah. Well, I had to keep it all straight. I don't have the best memory. Maybe it's the alcohol, but I'm like, okay, red, rye, easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the flagship, we were originally going to take 3 different mash bills and blend them in for our straight whiskey. As we got to tasting the barrels, we figured out that this one particular batch that we were going to blend in was just doing some really fun things, and said, why don't we keep that aside and we'll figure out something else for it. I got asked by all kinds of folks. I said, what's your favorite barrel? What's your favorite barrel? And I said, that's what we don't have, is an expression to put our favorite barrels into. And that's where the flagship came from. It was essentially some extra barrels that we didn't know what to do with until it kind of smacked us. Why don't we, similar to what Old Forester does with their birthday bourbon, why don't we take the barrels that we think are of that extra level and create an expression just to showcase that. And that's what we've done. And this year is our second flagship. It's at least 5 years old. So there is some land aging in there. They've spent at least 3.5 years, I'd say, on the barge. And quite frankly, I think it's our best one yet. And last year did pretty well for us. This
So
year,
each release of the flagship, will they taste a little different from the previous? Just because you're
yeah,
basing it off of the best barrels that you have. Obviously, those aren't going to necessarily repeat themselves when nature does its thing.
You got it. So, I mean,
Okay. Oh, I love
what,
that. See, I love when it changes over batches. I like stuff like that.
I want it to be a vintage, right? So it's the 2022,
Exactly.
and I want to do whatever the heck I want, and
Exactly.
it's what I want to drink, and I hope people agree with what I want to drink. But if they don't, well, there's a full bourbon shelf out
A
there. But
ton of options
yeah,
for them to drink exactly what they want to drink. Exactly. I love batches like that. So that's pretty cool. And I like to collect bottles. I'm a hoarder, if you couldn't tell. So I appreciate the vintage approach to whiskey that's been applied to wine for centuries. So I like that take. We got another good question. Okay. So did you guys notice a change in the flavor profile when you got the terrible weather with the tornadoes on the surrounding areas of Marshall and Graves County, or was there little impact in Ballard County?
well, thankfully, we did not have a direct hit like Mayfield and some of the other places. We were missed by a few miles. So that was fortunate. Unfortunate for obviously the folks in that part of the neck of the woods. But we did actually in the flagship batch had originally. So this is all through Green River, which is where we contract our distillation. We don't source, we contract, so we can control it through grain to glass. But
Mhm.
we did have some initial batches at Green River, and there was a windstorm that came through, and they had to collapse the warehouse. Uh,
Wow.
and some of those barrels that were in this blend were in that barrel house collapse, and then they ultimately made it over the barge. Um, all that to say, there's some fun things or some abnormal things that have happened to these barrels. I don't think we notice just because it takes so long. We're looking at seasons, not just a season, and so I think it's hard to pin down the effects of one weather event.
Yeah.
But certainly, anytime there's rocking on the river, that motion, we encourage it as long as it doesn't break our lines and push the barge down river.
Yeah, exactly. God forbid, we don't need that. I can almost like smell, and then maybe I'm a little bit influenced by the fact that I know that it's sitting on water, but I've been kind of noticing this a lot in whiskey lately. It's just being able to identify or kind of taste or smell like the water source. I don't know if the water source that I'm like smelling per se is the water source like from what it's being produced with, or the water source from what's shaking it up on the barge. But I can almost smell kind of like that salt watery, like natural body of water type of essence on the nose, and I like that a lot. It's really soft, but it's definitely there.
Well, I'll tell you, we are right on the edge of corn country. I mean, there's nothing around us but farms and lots of corn and occasionally soybean. So it's fresh air, and that's maybe the
Yeah,
smell of
and it
fresh air.
definitely comes through on the nose. Mm, that's really good. So this is my first time trying all of the lineup, so I'll be kind of like just talking about them as we go. But this is really, really nice. And like you said, it doesn't have that burn at the end. It's got a little bit of heat just because it's over 100 proof, but no real burn going down or anything like that.
Yeah, we still like it
Like
a
all of
little.
those quintessential notes you kind of hope for in a bourbon, they're there, but they're not like smacking you in the face with it.
Hmm.
It's a real nice, like soft medley of the caramels and the vanillas and a little bit of oak spice, but not too much. And maybe that comes from it having so much time to move around in it and not just sitting flat on one side or just sitting. Well, some people are now housing their barrels straight up, but I don't know. Maybe that motion like kind of helps it swirl and not get so too heavily concentrated in the oak.
Yeah, I certainly like to think the char of the barrel kind of works as this filtering effect.
Mm-hmm.
You
What
know,
level char do you guys do?
we go to 4. We do level
Okay.
4. Level 4, aged in Kentucky. I figured this barge thing's weird enough. I didn't need to throw in a whole bunch of other variables on the
Yeah.
outset.
No, I feel you on that. That is really yummy. Okay, so you started first with the American whiskey and the rye, correct?
Hmm. That's right.
Which one did you produce first? Or did those come out simultaneously?
Uh, Close enough. The straight whiskey was actually we just celebrated 2 years selling that. That was in October of 2020. not a lot going on that year. A lot of people drinking, but
Yeah, I was gonna say, did the pandemic work you all's favor in terms of response and people being engaged with because so many new products come out all the time.
yeah, no, I think it certainly had an effect. Towards the beginning of it, I think we saw as an industry a lot of people grabbing the familiar brands that they knew, because it was almost like hold your breath, get in, get out, and then once we
Yeah.
kind of had some sanity about, okay, this is going to last a little bit, wear your mask, all that sort of stuff. Folks were like, okay, I've had enough of XYZ. I really want to try something else new. And certainly we saw a huge bump in our launch. I mean, obviously, when you launch a new market, you guys may have seen, you get a big, but it's that second bottle that's really the important purchase, and
Yeah.
getting come back. The story will sell the first bottle, the juice will sell the second.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There's a lot of fruit on the nose for this rye. Ooh.
Yes. So our master blender, Scott, there's three of us at the company. Myself, Scott Byer, he's our master blender. And then we just hired on our first brand manager. So we're now a team of 3 strong, and we do all the barrel loading ourselves. We do all the blending ourselves. But this is his favorite is the rye. I like to think of it as it's almost like a Manhattan without the vermouth in terms of its flavor notes. It's got a little bit of that dried cherry on the back end.
Yes, very much so. It's like a little mini fruit bomb. It's nice. I like this a lot. Just enough chocolate, because I like to taste chocolate in my rye. It's just enough of that, but it's definitely that cherry is there. You said vermouth. Yep. Yeah, I could see like the tannins in the.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a 51% rye, 45%.
Ask. Okay.
And
45% corn.
I'm sorry?
You said 45% corn.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, so you get a lot of that corn sweetness. Whenever I go to these festivals and we're trying people on things, they'll say, "Oh, I want the bourbon. I'm not a rye person." I said, "Well, try the rye. I'm not a rye person's rye." And I've made a lot of converts to rye with this one.
So I cannot stand when somebody says I'm not a such and such person, like just writing off an entire category. There's so many different ones to try. Hey, you cannot have possibly tasted every rye in the world, every gin in the world, every tequila in the world. You don't know if you're particularly into that category until you've tried every bit of that category. Ooh, yum. Now, do you have any of the Flagship with you currently?
Of course I do.
Okay, do you want to pour and talk some notes with me? Because we got a question from the audience about the tasting notes on this particular release and wanting to know how it's different from last year's release. Now, I don't have a bottle of last year's release, but I do have the current one.
I've got it on my back bar, which unfortunately it's only got about this much in it. So I think I can tell you from memory.
Yeah.
This year's Flagship, I think where it stands differently from last year's. Last year's was more of a single barrel program. This year we wanted to try our hand at blending. Again, it's whatever I want it to be, which is the nice thing about, I think, being forward on this expression is each year is just going to be kind of what we're feeling. The difference is last year had a little bit more spice to it, a little more baking spice. While our bourbon is a wheat mash bill base, the Flagship this year and last year were both rye, 21% rye base. This year you're going to notice a lot more graham cracker and honey. It's a little bit sweeter on the palate,
Accurate.
Less spice.
Accurate, for sure. Yeah, there's a little spice, but it's not
Someone's
insane.
at the side door.
And you said, what's the mash bill on this one?
So that's a 21% rye bourbon.
1% rye. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No malted barley?
Oh, there's barley in there. I think it's, it's around the 5% mark.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely get that graham cracker. I definitely get that honey. I get a little bit of smoke. I get a little lemon peel too.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe, the oils that are coming off that peel. I get that and taste that in texture. and it kind of dissipates into a little more tannins as it finishes. It's nice. I like it. And
Yeah.
a
Well,
105 proof. Yeah, I don't really have to proof it down, so that's also nice.
the flagship's 100 proof. This year, our blue label bourbon is 105. And
Yeah.
again, yeah, for education on why we chose 105 because it's weeded. We just liked how you get a little closer to that barrel strength. It kept a lot more of that sweetness.
Mhm.
At the rye, 100 just is where it hit us this year. We may do a different proof next year. Again, it's kind of however we're feeling each year.
Yeah, I'm kind of love to try that rye at like a cask strength just to kind of see what it does. But okay, so you said the blue label, that's weeded.
That's correct.
Okay, that's the one that I'm sipping on. Okay. And so then what's the mash on that one?
The wheat is it's actually 1% wheat, so it's more or less the same grain and barley or corn and barley, just 21 wheat instead of 21 rye.
Okay, gotcha. This opened up some more. As it sits longer, it gets sweeter on the nose. Love that. I've got another question. Approximately how many bottles do you all get from producing the flagship each year? Oh, good question.
Well, last year we actually had more flagship than we produced this year. So last year, I want to say it was closer to 2,000 bottles. This year, I think we were at about 1,600.
Okay. That's a major difference. Is that due to like the weather and just affecting the yield you have in the barrel?
No, it had actually to do with a smaller batch,
Okay.
and we kind of used up the last bit of the 21%, and so next year is going to be possibly a weeded batch or whatever else we kind of find as we poke around. We may even do a flagship of the rye. We've got some really fun rye barrels that have been cooking along. So
Yeah, that would be a fun same approach to take with the rye. So if y'all do decide to do that, I'll be looking forward to that. I'm sure we'll be getting some in in the event that you do.
of course.
I keep sipping on this bourbon. Let me try the actual straight whiskey. What is the mash on the straight whiskey? Like for the people who may, I know we have a lot of whiskey nerds in here who already kind of understand the stuff, but for the few who may not, why calling it a straight whiskey? Did it have to do with the mash?
Hmm.
What were the factors in just making this a straight whiskey?
Well, the reason we came up with the straight whiskey happens to be from the fact that I grew up in the barge industry and not the whiskey industry. Um,
Okay.
I actually wanted this to be a rye, and so we mixed a high 95.5 rye with a 36% rye bourbon. And I said, okay, well, the resulting mash bill is going to be about a 66% rye, so this is going to be our rye whiskey. And that's when I found out from the TTB that there are such things as requirements for each of those labels. So I had already kind of decided that this is what we were going to do, and then we had to figure out what to call it. So the proper term for mixing a bourbon and a rye mash bill together is a straight whiskey,
Okay.
or whiskey straight once you hit the age requirement. So
Yeah.
essentially another happy learning, but quite frankly, it's been one of our best performing. And I think a
The
lot of it
nose on this is amazing.
yeah, so the bourbon and the rye both develop different profiles as they age. Obviously, rye hits some different notes at a younger age than bourbon does,
Mm.
and so the straight whiskey is really part of that spice rack effect that I talked about. Allows us to pull in different flavors as they develop, and this is I think our third blend that you're trying now. So each.
I mean, candied orange, a little bit of caramel, but not a ton. I get a little chocolate. There's some other fruit there that I can't quite pick up yet. I'll get it at some point, but really nice sweet notes on the nose.
Mhm.
It's really nice.
Yeah, I think this was the one that actually won us Consumer Choice Award at the SIP Awards this year. So that was a nice little feather in the cap.
Oh, I see why. This is yummy. This might be my favorite of the three. Wow. This is really nice. It's not like a surprise wow. I didn't expect it to not be good. But I didn't expect it to be my favorite of the three. This is really nice. Ooh. And was there any wheat in either of these mash bills or no?
No, those are it's rye bourbon and then that kind of traditional 95.5 rye whiskey.
Right. Oh, that is so nice. Yes, that one actually might be my fave. And it's the lowest proof, but I kind of want a little water in it. I just have a feeling it's going to give me something else with a couple of drops of water in that. Yum.
Yeah, looking her up.
So how did you find your team? Your mighty team of three.
My team of
Aside
three.
from yourself.
Well, actually, Scott and I more or less grew up together. He worked in Florida prior to coming on board with us as a ranch hand, and went down to Florida a lot. We got acquainted, and then he moved up to Nashville to pursue a degree at Belmont University here. While he was there, he was working at Greenbrier Distillery. And, I was kind of working on this project. So I needed somebody who was strong to help me roll barrels. And I called him up like, hey, you're used to throwing hay bales around. A barrel's basically the same thing. And
Is it basically the same thing, Hank?
well,
in terms of being heavy, maybe?
yes. Well, they kind of have a similar smell, according to him.
I can see that.
Yeah. And so, but at least a hay bale, or a barrel rolls, a hay bale, you got to, fully pick up.
Lift it, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I needed somebody to help me roll barrels around. He was great. And it's like, hey, I don't really know what, I'd have you do, but will you just come work with me as we get this thing launched? And it's like, we'll figure it out together. And that's kind of been how we've gone about it. And then, he was out in the marketplace selling the stuff, and then he and I would sit down and we'd start coming up with these blends, and he'd rattle off like, oh, I get like the yellow Smarties on this one, and I'm like, man, where are you getting all these profiles? And just
it gets that deep.
He gets deep, and he has a much better imagination than me. I think that's part of it. So he can just kind of recall all these different flavor notes. He essentially kind of led the charge on the blends, and I said, you know what, you're not really a director of sales, you're really more of a master blender. And so we recently made him master blender for the brand about a month ago, and just kind of recognized the work he's been doing. So excited there. And then our third guy that joined us, Steven, I actually went back to Vanderbilt to present this case study on our brand and how we built it. Mm-hmm. And he raised his hand and said, well, I'm more of a Scotch guy, but this kind of seems interesting what you guys are doing. So we and said, we really need somebody to kind of help us get out there and activate, and the brand's growing, and we need somebody that can also help roll more barrels. And he came on in the summer. So it's the three amigos.
I love that. And you really don't need too many people.
No, but rolling barrels around is it's always fun to have someone to help you.
Oh yeah, I can imagine, especially with you having this big old barge and all these barrels on it. So how many barrels does the barge hold in total? Like how many can it hold?
Yeah, so the first barge was about 2,000. The next barge that we're building is 3,000. Nice. So we're going to load about 800 barrels later next month of bourbon onto the barge. So, we're planning to grow this thing. Next year, we've got plans to almost fill up the second barge. So in a couple of years, I'm hoping to have a full fleet of these things, just working on improving the smell of the river, just make it smell like a whiskey distillery.
Like good old whiskey. I love that. And so will both barges be in the same place in terms of location? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. What else do you have planned for OH Ingram in terms of some future stuff? Do you have ideas of a single barrel program and any of that stuff? Wait to start loading. Do we still have you? Oh, perfect. Okay, you're back. Can you hear me? Oh, hold on a second, guys.
So much for Google Fiber. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. So, I think we're going to focus on building out the bourbon space first, working on the spice rack, getting some older expressions on our whiskeys to bring in additional flavors. There's no playbook for barge aging, and we're kind of making it up as we go along. But so far, I think the market's received it well, and I think we're making some tasty stuff. I think there's also a future where we're aging other expressions of maybe rum or maybe some tequila. So we'll play around with a couple of things, but I gotta have enough room for the whiskey that we're planning to sell first.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I like the idea of finishing off some tequila or something like that on the river. Oh, there we go. Do you have an on-site area for tasting rooms, etc.? If not, do you have plans for that in the future?
I absolutely do. I think we can have a really cool tour. There's not a lot of distilleries that I know of that have a riverboat, in their backyard that you can go kind of sail around on. Our Rickhouse is the only one you need a life vest to go into. So we have some natural built-in things there, I think, that are pretty cool to show off. But I think we're probably 2 to 3 years away from being able to have people out there. It's still pretty industrial. It's part of a working dock. We're working on kind of creating our own space right now, but until we can satisfy the whiskey demand, it's kind of hard to say, okay, let's go take a bunch and sink it into a gift shop or something, but we'll get there.
Yeah. So what has surprised you the most in terms of what you've learned when it comes to producing whiskey?
That's a good one. I think one of the things that we've learned is just really, you hear people talk about it, how different barrels develop different flavor profiles in different locations, and it's so true. And one of the things that I really tell Scott and Stephen is, we don't need to recreate what we've already done. We need to make it better. And so as we identify these spots in the barge that are better suited for this flavor profile or that flavor profile, it's learning how to bring those in so that once we do hit that expression, that we say, okay, we've kind of reached the pinnacle of what this flavor expression should be. Now, how do we replicate that and make that consistent? And I think that's the area that is going to be the biggest challenge for us. Just like any distillery, making sure you're able to kind of make the flavors that you want every time with consistency and fulfill all the orders. It's kind of just the standard production stuff. But and then the last thing I'd say is getting the story out there. People say, well, what is river age? What does mellowed on the Mississippi mean? And explaining to them that, the Rickhouse floats, not just, we're on the bank of the river somewhere. That's it, just communicating that story over and over and saying, it's something different. And we think
has the response, when you do explain to people the whole river aging aspect of it, has the response pretty much been mostly positive, or have some people kind of had their nose turned up, like out of confusion about whether or not they should like that or not?
Look, I'll be candid. I had a retail account tell me one time, they said, yeah, we were offered this, thought it was a gimmick, we passed. And I was riding around with the rep, and I said, I want to go talk to those guys. And we did. And it was actually, it was pretty funny. they tried all the products and they said, "Oh my God, this, you know, we had no idea that it was actually something real. We just thought this was a marketing shtick." And I said, "Well, I mean, you know, it's a floating Rickhouse. It's we're not trying
Yeah, how much of a
to."
stick that can actually be. That's a pretty complicated stick, I'll say that.
Yeah, well, and they tried it and they said we love it. They compared it. They said it was better than some other products out there that, you know, I won't expose them for.
Yeah.
But you know, that was nice. And we go to these festivals. I was in Frankfort, Kentucky at the Bourbon on the Banks, and then Kentucky Bourbon Festival 2 weeks ago. And you know, the reaction from people, they go, and then they try it and they go, wow, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then they just want to stick around, and I say, okay, well, thank you. We need to make room for everybody else to try. They just want to ask all these questions, which is great. But
Yeah.
you know, the mob of like, oh, tell me more,
It's a
tell me more.
great problem to have.
That's true.
Ooh. As the rye sits, it almost tastes like cherry cola. Like before Coca-Cola started to taste like straight syrup.
I haven't gotten that one yet, but maybe I don't let my rye sit out long enough.
So I've had it sitting out for a while now. I had it sitting out about 20 minutes before we started the live. And so it's been sitting ever since. And yeah, it's giving like cherry cola. And I used to love cherry Coke.
Well, you know, that particular batch won Best American Rye at the Ascot Awards this year. So,
Shout out to Ascot. I'm on the council.
hey, maybe Fred's a cherry cola guy too. So,
He may very well be. Oh, we got another question. Hi, I live in Wycliffe. I guess that's how you pronounce that. And do tourism for the area. I'd love to chat sometime about the future of O.H. Ingram's tourism. Okay.
all right.
And that was Lindsay Dale, 99. Hi, Lindsay Dale. Well,
All
you
right.
can feel free to
Is he gonna
DM
do
O.H.
it on
Ingram.
contact us page at Ingram?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, feel free to
Yeah.
DM them about that one.
Okay.
Because I don't know if I can facilitate that for you, Lindsay.
We'll get the team on it. The team of the two others.
The two others. Well, that sounds like a brand manager job now. So you get to delegate that to your one team member.
There you go.
That is the
All right.
joy of expansion. Well, all right, Hank, I won't hold you for too long. Oh, wait, let me see. I think we have another question. Oh, where can I buy in Nashville? I want the straight whiskey. Do you guys have, are you guys in liquor stores in Nashville?
We are. We're in 5 states. My goal has been to follow the Mississippi River for distribution. So Minnesota, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Louisiana. So around Nashville specifically, you know, there's been several stores that have been really good to us. So you know, I always tell people anyone without bars on it probably has us inside.
Okay, there we go. We're not going to throw out too many names of retailers, saying that Seelbach themselves are a retailer, and we do have all 3 available for shipping. So you can also order directly from us for the individual that asked that question.
Yeah, Nashville's a tough one, though. I don't know if Tennessee is not the best with their liquor laws. I don't have deep enough pockets to go fight that one, but
I feel you on that.
Mhm.
That is why we are still in the 20s range in terms of the amount of states that we're available to. It's just some of these states are just such a handful. Like we're still getting a ton of requests to ship to Texas. I don't know what the issues are there with Texas. They're so liberal on so many other things, but one of these days they will cave.
In Kentucky, and because we don't have a still, Kentucky just passed a law that you can sell bottles at the festivals, but we don't have a still. We have a warehouse permit for the barge. We have a rectifier's license that we can sell the customers, and you know that. But because we don't have a still, we can't sell bottles at these festivals, and it's just it hurts. Because you know all these vendors, they'll talk afterwards like, oh, we did 10 cases. Oh, we did 12 cases. Ingram, how many did you do? Well, I gave away 4 bottles. You know, 1 sip at a time.
Yeah. Damn, that sucks. So because you don't have a still, I wonder what the logic is behind that. A producer is a producer.
Well, if you can tell me, then you got more ideas than I do.
I got to do some investigations on these types of things. Like, what is you guys' logic behind these rules? And is that like a federal thing, or is that just based on like the state that these festivals are in?
That's just a Kentucky thing. And I think
That's
Kentucky logic is if you've built a distillery, then it's a privilege that we should extend to the distilleries. But I'd say, well, we're making investments too. So I'll write my local congressman and we'll get it started.
You actually should, because I'm sure your local congressman enjoys them a sip of whiskey.
Who doesn't?
And you could try sending them a bottle. Maybe that'll maybe that'll give it a little extra nudge.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's considered bribery or not, so don't quote me, y'all. But just a gift.
Maybe we'll give them a tour. Let them experience what we're doing.
There we go. A tour. There we go. Okay, now you're thinking that's not bribery at all. There we go. See, solutions. It helps to talk things through.
That's right.
All right, well, Hank, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you answering all of my questions and all of our audience's questions. I am loving the whole lineup, so definitely excited to see what you guys do coming down the pike. That's for sure. I love this, like that you guys have this very unique kind of niche that you guys are working within with the river aging. So definitely excited to see kind of what the higher, once you guys, put out some bottles that are at a higher age range, what that does. So super excited to see what y'all come up with down the road.
Makes two of us. But
Yeah.
thank you for all your support. The Seelbach community's been amazing, and you and Blake for all the support. Obviously, being able to get more bottles in more hands is great for building the brand. So, to anybody out there interested in finding out more, our Ingram Whiskey handle on Instagram and Facebook, ingramwhiskey.com. We don't give tours yet of the barge, but just put it in your calendar to send me an email in 2 years, and we'll get it figured out. But we'll keep you guys supplied as much as we can.
Love it. Well, thank you, Hank, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Obviously, we have these available at seelbach.com and on the app if you guys have any interest in trying any of them. And if you have any other questions for myself or Hank, feel free to comment. I'll share this on our feed after this. So feel free to comment, feel free to DM, all the things. So thank you.
All right. Bye now.
All right. See you guys.